You guys are great. I love it. Sorry, my voice is a little raspy today. I am a little bit under the weather. We are live. Is my phone off? Yes. You see, I got a new phone. Case. Yeah, case. That's what goes on your phone. I'm very pleased with it. Excuse me. Good evening. Welcome to the Maven with the frog in her throat. And this is Vampire Book Club, and you are here to talk about vampires with me. So happy you're all here. You do not have to read the books to join Vampire Book Club. You do not have to know anything about the books. You can just hang out with us and talk about vampires. First, we are going to talk about the book. And then, when we're done talking about the book, we can talk about other things. So if you ask me questions in the chat and I don't answer, it's because that is something we should talk about later, not right now. Don't take it personally. I just like to keep things organized. Thank you. Thank you. You're all so sweet. Tonight, I am drinking champagne. And by champagne, I mean, well, it's not even Prosecco. It's Cristalino. And the label is very specific that it's not affiliated with Cristal in any way. It is not from the Cristal region of France. Where is this even from? Oh, it's 17th century Spanish castle. So I'm assuming it's a Spanish sparkling wine product. And the reason I'm drinking this is because it is left over from my other book club. That was this weekend. By this weekend, I mean 3 days ago. And I need to finish it, so cheers. I'm drinking it out of a glass that is engraved, as you can see, has a chandelier on it because, you know, I like Phantom of the Opera. This was one of the souvenirs that I had at my wedding, and I ended up with like a whole bunch of them left over. So now I just have a ton of matching champagne glasses that say, "Till death do us part," and then the wedding date, which is October 13, 2013, because that's what kind of wedding I had. So, cheers. I hope you're all drinking something too. This is a boozy book club, as all my book clubs are, by evidence of having the booze left over. You'd think we would have finished it at book club. You would be wrong, because we finished several other bottles of other things, and this was the one that was left. So, that's my excuse. Ah, I have lipstick on my teeth. Hideous. These are the perils of being a vampire on the internet, right? Pardon me. See, my camera's following me. It's like, no shame for you. I put on this lipstick, and it was a matte lipstick that wasn't supposed to rub off, right? But then it wasn't dark enough. It was like too pink, and I didn't like it. So I had to put a gloss on top of it, and now it's stuck to my teeth. Nobody wants to see that, right? Once I filmed a whole vampire review video, and I had lipstick on my teeth in it, and I had to refilm the whole entire thing over again. I was so upset because those videos are hard to film. I bet it's going to happen again too. This lipstick is so smeary. So drink up. Don't pay attention to my mouth. The faster I drink, the more the lipstick will rub off on my champagne glass, and then it won't be on my teeth anymore, right? Yes, it was the blood of my victims. That's what the red on my teeth was. Sure. Yes. It's much less embarrassing. Have I been stalling long enough? I always stall at the beginning of these live streams to give people more time to join, because I know we have a good deal of members in the Vampire Book Club. We have about 500 members in the Vampire Book Club. Obviously, not all of them participate, but anyone is free to join, and you do not have to participate to join the Vampire Book Club. But please do join and lurk. We love a lurker. And, you know, if all 500 people show up, great. If they don't, cheers to who's here. I do need a story arc where I transition to a vampire. That would be great. Instead of just a wannabe. Speaking of my makeup, I tried some new makeup today. I'm not sure if I like it, but it is from my Dracula makeup palette, which I thought would be appropriate because we read a Dracula-related book this month. And I showed this before in one of my Vampire Library videos, but I got this from Vampire Cosmetics. No, they aren't paying me to talk about it. They have no idea I'm talking about it. But it's shaped like a little book. It's got like Dracula on the cover, on the spine. It looks like a book of Dracula. And inside there's a mirror and what is these? So there's colors. more colors, more colors. So 3 pages of colors with some cool Dracula illustrations. And this character right here, I thought she actually looked pretty much exactly like the main character in the book we read, so I want to share that with you. Yeah, you know, why would a vampire need a, here, can you see me? Yes, so that's how you know that I am just a phony, a fake. Yeah, 3 pages. They cost about $50, but when I got it, they were having a buy one, get one free sale. And they have several of these palettes, so I got a couple of them, which I talked about before. But I love them. VampireCosmetics.com, vampire with a Y, if you want to buy them for yourself. Definitely recommend. It's good quality makeup, as you can see. All right. Hey, we have 66 viewers. That is a lucky number. So, wow. Sorry, I'm just looking at the lipstick on my glass on the screen. It's so red. It looks like tempura paint. This month, for Vampire Book Club, we read Dowry of Blood. Black and red book, so I'm going with the black and red theme. And it was presented to us, me, the internet in general, as a Dracula retelling, told from the point of view of his brides, his 3 brides. Specifically one of them. One of them is the main bride who is telling the story. It's all from her point of view. About her life being Dracula's bride. So, you know, all her life well before the story of Dracula, up to and then after the story of Dracula, because, surprise, he doesn't die during the classic Bram Stoker story of Dracula that we know. He survives and he continues having a life of his own. Got a big smear of lipstick on the cover. Yes, oopsie! Lipstick strikes again. Mwah. It is a very pretty cover. This book is I want to say second edition, but it may be even more than second edition. This book has a great history. It started off as a self-published independent book, and it got so popular that it got a major book deal, which is really huge. That rarely ever happens. 50 Shades of Grey is one of the most famous examples of that, but it is super rare. If you want to get your book published, if you are an author trying to become a published author, do not self-publish your book, because that will ruin your chances of getting an agent to pick up your book. No, YouTube, I do not want to insert ads. I'm talking. Do not interrupt me, YouTube. Don't self-publish your book if you want to get a major book deal. The chances of this happening to you are exceedingly rare. If you want your book to be published for real, never self-publish. Don't put any part of it on the internet anywhere. Just query, publish, keep it secret, keep it safe. Only when you decide not to get your book professionally published, do it independently. So make sure you know what you want to do with your book before you self-publish. Yeah, so it's a second edition, but I have seen other editions too. Maybe they're just like international covers or something with different covers. But the first edition was shorter than this. The audiobook of the first edition was 5 hours. The audiobook of this edition was 7 hours. I know the epilogue in this book was added. It wasn't in the original edition. But the epilogue is pretty short. It's definitely not 2 hours worth of additional audiobooks. So I'm led to believe that there is much more material that was added in this than in the original, besides the epilogue. However, no one in the book club has read both versions that they admitted and has been able to tell us. So if you know the differences between the first 2 versions, besides just like typos being corrected and better editing and mistakes being fixed, please tell me, because I want to know which parts were added for this, or what else was different between the 2 of them. So this book had a lot of hype. It was a really big deal, the fact that it got that popular, and I've been hearing about it for a long time, and by the time I finally picked up on it and was really interested in it, it had already been pulled from all the places you could buy it because it was getting published in this edition, and the publisher didn't want those self-published versions out there. So there was a period where you couldn't get this book. It was very rare, very hard to find. And then this version came out last fall. I guess big book drops are always around October. If a book is published in October, that's how you know publishers think it's going to be big. That is like the best month for prestige to get your book published. And I got it as a Christmas gift. My father gave it to me. Actually, Paul also gave it to me. I had 2 copies for a while, but I returned the one he gave me to the store and got some other books instead. Because it's kind of an expensive book. It's like almost a $30 book for something that's really short. Like, obviously, it only takes 7 hours to read for the audiobook. Pretty small. It is not a young adult book. A lot of people assume that because I guess it's got a pretty lady on the cover and it's kind of short, and a woman wrote it, and if a woman wrote it and it's popular, it must be a young adult book, right? It can't be real literature. But no, this is meant to be adult literature and not genre fiction so much, even though it is about vampires. It's meant to be literary fiction, you know, highbrow stuff, artsy fiction. And it is artsy in the same way that like art films are artsy, like they're weird and you know they're supposed to be weird, and you watch them and you're like, I know I'm supposed to be feeling smarter for watching this, but it's just weird and I don't know that it's really saying much about art. Like it's that kind of artsiness to it. Some people love the style, some people think it's totally pretentious and that the author did not have the skills to pull it off, and they call it amateurish and stuff. But also a lot of reviews that you read about it, you don't know whether they're talking about the first self-published version or this version. It is the author's debut book as far as I know, so people call her inexperienced. Maybe they're correct. But according to the flap about her illustrious self, she has a college degree in writing and also a degree in theological seminary. She was studying to be a minister, I guess, or at least know enough that she could be. And there's a lot of religion in this book, so she puts her theology to use in this book because the main character is from medieval Romania. So of course she's, you know, religious. So she knows her scripture. So as a retelling of Dracula told from the bride's point of view is extremely misleading. That is not what this book is at all. It is the bride's life story, but it never retells the story of Dracula at all. It skips over it entirely. She is Dracula's bride from the 1200s to like the 1930s, and we skip straight from like the 1780s to the 1910s. So the entire Dracula Bram Stoker story that happened is just skipped over completely, never mentioned. There's like an Easter egg where she name drops the Harkers. She's like, oh yeah, that business with the Harkers a couple of years ago, Dracula was really mad about that. Doesn't say anything about how it went, how he survived, how she survived, because in Bram Stoker's book, the brides and Dracula all did die. And in Bram Stoker's book, there were 3 brides, but in this book, the third one didn't exist yet until well after that. So it does not retell Dracula at all. If that's what you're looking for, you will be disappointed. It tells the story of the bride's life and of her relationship with Dracula, and it is very much a relationship story and focuses on how she existed as his wife, what her life as the wife of Dracula was like. And it's not just being the wife of a vampire, but being the wife of this specific vampire, what kind of husband he was. And he is a classic narcissist, just complete NBD behavior. Narcissistic abuse is the nature of their relationship. It's a classic cycle of abuse stuff, and she talks about how she's trapped in this cycle of abuse. So the book starts with her saying that she has killed Dracula, that Dracula is dead. And she is writing a letter to him, even though he's dead, explaining why she killed him, how her life started, how they met, everything up until when she killed him and why she did it. So the entire thing is written not in second person, but to a second person. So even though she's writing in first person about herself and using I as narration, she is addressing it to you. And she never says Dracula's name, and she says she does that deliberately because she wants to strip him of his identity. She wants to rob him of the power of his name, because when he made her his vampire bride, she was dying. She was dead, 2 breaths away from dying. So her mortal life ended, her identity ended, and she was reborn as his bride, and her only sense of identity was his bride, and he gave her a new name as his bride, which is Constanta, because she is constant, she is steadfast, she is strong, which is kind of a weird assumption for him to make upon first meeting her. And one of my biggest complaints about this book is her as a character. She's narrating it from such a self-deprecating way that I don't understand at all why Dracula even wanted her to be his bride. Like, she's very modest. She's not going to say anything good about herself or what made him love her. So when their romance starts, he meets her in a battlefield. She's dying in this village that had been raided by bad guys, generic bad guys in Transylvania at the time. And he finds her bleeding out in the dirt. She hasn't been sexually assaulted, which is nice, but she has been beaten to death and, stabbed, and she's choking on her own blood. And then her family home was set on fire, and she had to watch her father and her brothers and sisters and her parents burn to death. She's lying there dying, full of anger and rage and sadness. And he's just tromping around in this raided village, I guess looking for people to eat. She says there's legends of vampires coming to villages like that to prey upon the fallen victims. But he sees her lying there in the dirt, and he's just like, hey, that chick would make a good bride. I don't have a bride right now. I have in the past, but I need one right now, so I'm going to make her my bride. Nothing about why he picks her, of all the people lying around the dirt. He seems to be impressed that she has a will to live, that she doesn't want to die. But I don't know that that makes her particularly special, that she'd be chosen by Dracula. It never says anything about her being particularly beautiful or interesting or exciting. As soon as he makes her a vampire, she immediately wants revenge, and she's got this fiery spirit, and she wants bloody revenge. And I'm like, okay, here's her quality. This is what you want. He likes how strong and ambitious she is and how much she goes after what she wants. So he takes her to the 5 guys who raided her village, and she slaughters them, tears them apart, drinks their blood, and that's how she's born a vampire. But then nothing like that ever happens again between her and Dracula. And that's not a quality in her that he actually ends up liking at all. Maybe he likes that he squashes that quality out of her, but for some reason that keeps him interested for 800 years. So with his other brides, you know exactly why he's drawn to them, exactly why he falls in love with them and is excited by them. With her, he just finds her lying in the dirt, and he's like, I guess you're my new bride. And even as he carries her home, and he's being very tender with her, he's being very respectful. He's like, you don't have to touch me if you don't want to. I will wait for you to come to me on your own. We don't have to have sex. I'm not going to look at you when you're naked and you're taking a bath. I'll be very respectful. No pressure. You don't understand why. She thinks that maybe it was all part of the manipulation to get me to trust you. I was like, I don't know. How else are you going to get married? I think it's very, I think it could have been better, honestly. And he finds her in the year 1200, and he says at that point he's about 1,000 years old. And she winds up living with him until the 1930s or 40s. So she's 800-ish years old. And the entire time she's living with him, she's living in fear that he'll kill her off like he's done with his previous brides and, replace her, because she and the other brides are replaceable. If he gets bored with them, he'll kill her off. But he doesn't. He keeps her for 800 years. And if that was his pattern with his previous brides, to just kill them off when he gets bored of them or when they get too rebellious, and he's only 1,000 years old, she must have been something really special to stick around for 800 years, because that was already that would have only been one more bride, basically, that he had before her. But it makes it seem like he's had hundreds and hundreds of brides before her, so. Yeah, I don't get why he likes her. I don't get why she likes him. She says he's handsome, but he's there's nothing there's no chemistry between them. That's it. There is zero chemistry between them. She's very grateful that he saved her and gave her the gift of immortality. So her very first night with him, even though she's just lost her entire family and her life and, all this horror and bloodshed, she throws herself at him and wants to have sex with him because, that's what you do when you're recently traumatized. She says she's not a virgin. She's slept with a stable boy or whatever, but she was just a peasant. She wasn't anyone who would have had a reason to be not married at a young age in her society. So the fact that she wasn't married and she'd only had teenage trysts before makes me think she must have been very young, right? Maybe 16 or whatever the pre-marriageable age was at the time. It wasn't said ever that she had gotten older than the usual marriageable age, just that, she wasn't married yet. So I'm guessing she must be some kind of teenager. But she's also often refers to herself as matronly looking, as not as beautiful as the other brides, as dowdy. And then there's a part at the end where it's revealed that she's a total hottie and she's been gorgeous, this beautiful redheaded vampire seductress the whole time. And I was like, well, we don't, as a reader, don't get a sense of that. So that made it very hard to buy from the beginning. So this book is told in this very artsy style, as I've mentioned, as a letter, where she's just summarizing everything that ever happened, as if she was writing a letter. It's not written like a novel. It's not structured with plot. It doesn't really even have a plot until part 2. It's written in 3 parts. So part 2 is where the plot shows up, aka when her emotionally abusive narcissistic husband decides he wants a second bride, and then she immediately gets jealous of that. Her jealousy is so much like, oh, bitches, am I right? Like, girls are just gonna be jealous of other girls. And hasn't been previously established that she's that kind of person. So yeah, a lot of the writing in this felt very shallow to me, felt very underdeveloped, felt very tell and not show, because she'll like say, well, then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and I realized that meant this about the way you were treating me, and oh, you were nice in this way, but I knew later it was a manipulation all along. Like, if a book was written like a novel, it would show us those things happening for us to realize it was a manipulation all along, right? Like, the narrator wouldn't tell us that, but it's not written that way. So because it's not written as a novel, a lot of people who were expecting novel were turned off by it. Some people think the prose is gorgeous, and they think it's the best written thing they've ever read, and people love it, and other people just can't stand it. I think maybe the author was trying to pay homage to the epistolary format of Dracula, but if you read the letters that are in Dracula, they don't just summarize centuries. They'll summarize a specific scene. They'll be written like a novel with like action and dialogue and plot beats and moments. Whereas this just glosses over centuries, and she talks about all the places they went and moved and lived together. So they're living in Transylvania or whatever until the Black Death comes in the 1300s, right? So she's been his bride for about 100 years, and he's kept her locked up in his castle. Zero exposure to the outside world. She says she likes to hunt criminals because she likes to be like a vigilante vampire, only killing evildoers, because it feeds into that sense of revenge she wanted from how she died with the guys that raided her village. But we never actually get to see her do that. We never see like any examples of her living that life. So all we get to actually see of her is her meek little browbeaten, cowed, kept woman of her husband who will, love bomb her and then be really bitchy to her just to like keep her feeling insecure, cutting her off, all the classic cycle of abuser stuff. It's as if, someone in the 1200s was aware of like modern psychological studies or something. Yeah, the other thing that we know about, like, she has no hobbies, she has no life, she does nothing. She tells us that she like has hobbies sometimes, like does art, but we never actually see it. Her only thing is that she's religious, because she was raised religious and she still like kind of believes in God. And she doesn't know what to make about her being a vampire with believing in God, but it doesn't end up being some kind of like epic existential struggle. It's just like something for her to do sometimes, is pray sometimes, or like go to church sometimes just because she likes the ritual of it, but it doesn't really affect her that much. So that's another, I felt, missed opportunity, especially since the author is a theologian. And you look at a book like Interview with the Vampire, where the vampire's entire struggle of being a reluctant vampire was thinking that it was against his god, right? But this, she's not a reluctant vampire at all. She loves being a vampire. It's just her husband that's the problem, because her husband is very domineering. But, in her society, that was normal, and she was used to it. And she's like, this is my life. He takes care of me. I'm happy to be a kept woman. Until, we get to, like, the early 1600s, 1500s, like Elizabethan times, maybe a little bit later. Turns out he's had a pen pal for centuries. So they leave Transylvania when the Black Death happens, and they start like country hopping, and they live in various different places. And we never get to see any sense of like her life in those places either. Like, it's just all skipped over. So he has a pen pal who is this very smart lady who likes pulling strings in politics behind the scenes, but she's also very young. She's also like, I don't think she's a teenager, but she's like so young and so gorgeous, and she makes Constanta look like an old matron by comparison. So I don't know if maybe Constanta like aged slightly as a vampire, like if she was 16 when I found her, but then she's like grown up and now she's in her 30s or something, so old. So they go to visit this lady, and as soon as Constanta realizes that his pen pal is a woman, she's instantly jealous, and she's just like, bitches, and just like claws her out, mad. But also at the same time, she does think this lady, Magdalena, is really, really hot. She's also Spanish, so she's like a spicy Latina, right? So she's like, I'm so attracted to her, and I really want to like get in bed with her and, give her all these kisses, but I'm also really jealous that he wants it too. And it's okay to be conflicted. Like, a character can be conflicted, but the way it's written, it just seems really inconsistent. Like, either show us a struggle, like show us how she's infatuated with her instead of just having her tell us, yes, I also wanted to have sex with her. Like, show it. Not just tell us that she has conflicting feelings. Show it. Oh, thank you, JRL Studios, for the $4.99. If this is supposed to be the OG Dracula, how could she go to church and see religious symbols? Wafers burnt me. Yes, you know, she also can't turn into a bat or a wolf or a mist, and neither can he. She can't fly. She can see in mirrors. So even though this is supposed to be the OG Dracula, because he did have that business with the Harkers, none of those rules apply. And like, as I was reading through it, and I started getting up to the 1800s, the Victorian age, expecting like, okay, here comes Dracula stuff, and then it skipped it, and suddenly we're in 1919. I was like, wait, I thought this was supposed to be Dracula. I must have been wrong. It wasn't Dracula all along. This is just some other vampire who's Dracula-ish. Okay, that's fine. And then 2 pages later, that business with the Harkers and 20 years ago. Oh yeah, he was mad about that. So yeah, if you were looking for OG Dracula retelling, you'll be disappointed. So the plot finally arrives when her asshole narcissistic husband reveals that he wants to bring another woman into their marriage, and he wants this Magdalena lady to be his. And the reason he's attracted to her is because she's so charismatic and so popular, and she's got such a great brain on her head, and she like has all this correspondence with all these political leaders. But all he wants to do is make her his kept woman. He wants to put out that light and snuff that fire, and cut her off from all her contacts, make her completely lose the life that made her happy, where she thinks she's going into this glamorous vampire lifestyle where she'll have even more freedom. Nope, wrong. He just wants to put that out. And yet, he doesn't seem to want to do it sadistically. He's not like gleeing over it. Like, clearly he's someone who needs control because he's like vastly insecure and narcissistic, but he doesn't like get off on control. Like, when he's in his controlling moods, he's mad. He's not, like, turned on. So it's not like a fetish. But then Magdalena, like, after centuries of having her light squashed out, and, you know, Constanta and she start becoming besties because they can, like, both relate over being abused by their horrible husband, who is never physically abusive. He's seductive, and he'll, like, distract her with sex, but he's never forceful. He never, like, hurts them or physically does anything. He just says such cutting words and such harsh looks. You know, emotional abuse is valid. It is very valid. But he's never physically abusive. So Magdalena starts falling into these depressive states. And he gets mad about that. I was like, dude, you're the one who squashed out her light. You're the one who, like, wanted to knock her down a peg and take her away from all of her beautiful gloriousness that you loved about her in the first place. Now you're mad at her for being depressed that she has to live like this. So, you know, wash, rinse, repeat, he falls in love with another bride. This time it's a guy, which is pretty cool because, you know, we're getting a queer aspect here. We already had the queer aspect between Magdalena and Constanta because they become sister wives who are also, like, lovers. So they're, you know, touchy-feely and sexy with each other, and for a while Constanta's like, I don't know what label fits us, I don't know what to call us, and Magdalena's like, just go with it, it's fun, let's have sex, we're fine. And she doesn't, like, fall in love with Magdalena more than Dracula, just, like, in a different way, and she's constantly talking with Magdalena about how awful Dracula is, and yet he shows up and she's like, as soon as he was in the room, I was drawn to him. And once he stayed away from me for 2 days, and all I could do was cry because he had that much of a hold over me. Like, but I don't see that hold he has over you. You keep telling me he has this, but all I see is you disliking him and not being drawn to him and how much he repulses you. Because I think the author was trying to get across how abusive he was and showing, like, oh yeah, he's charming and charismatic, and that's how the narcissist gets you, right? But I never saw her reaction to that in a way that made me feel there was any chemistry between them at all. Yeah. So same thing happens with Magdalena. So now we're up to the 1900s. Apparently the Dracula story happened in there sometime, and now they're in Russia, and he falls in love with this sexy young model / actor, Alexei, who's 19 years old, which I thought was probably about the same age the other two were, and maybe even older. But they keep talking about how childlike and how innocent and how young he is because, of course, they're hundreds of years old by now, and he's only 19. He's a fresh new baby vampire. But apparently, the fact that they talk about him this way really upset a lot of readers. I was reading a lot of reactions online, and they thought that the relationship between Constanta and Alexei was more motherly, which it is at points, but then it does become romantic, and they're like, ew, gross. She keeps talking about how childish and childlike he is, but she has sex with him. It's so incestuous. I was like, have you guys ever read Gothic literature before? Did you know that this is a trapping of Gothic? And they're also really grossed out by the fact that the brides call each other sisters and yet are still romantically involved. Like, sister wives have been a thing for a long time. A lot of people are really turned off by the incestualness of it, even though none of them are, mortally related in any way whatsoever. There's absolutely zero incest in this. It can't be coded incest. That's not a thing. People are so conservative now on the internet. Thank you, Lindsay P, for the $4.99. So yeah, I clearly have a lot of complaints about this book. A lot of things that I did not enjoy, but that was not one of them. I'm perfectly fine with the Gothic, hints of taboo romance with age gaps and differences. Yeah, that's what Gothic romance is. And seeing someone as childlike and innocent doesn't mean that they're literally child-coded and it's pedophilic for them to have sex. Get over it. That's not a thing. In Dracula, the brides aren't even called brides. They're referred to as weird sisters, right? And I'm pretty sure that's true. I think the bride's term for them came from something else. Though, does Dracula say something about how Lucy will be his bride? And I don't know. It's been a long time since I've actually read OG Dracula. There's so many other interpretations of Dracula. They start to kind of blend together in your mind. I would have to look it up. But they are his brides in that they're his life partners, right? He lives with them. And she mentions when she's talking about Dracula's past relationships that she found out by snooping in his diary, which he got really mad about, but he didn't punish her. He did get mad about it, and she got really scared. That he's had past husbands before, too. He's had brides and husbands. He's an equal opportunity lover. Gender means nothing to him, which is great. It's very perfectly vampiric. Dracula in the book was lusting after Jonathan and had that weird thing going on with Renfield. Dracula is pretty queer-coded in the book, too. A lot of homoeroticism in the book. So him going after his third bride being a man is perfectly fine. And there's no weirdness about oh, he's a man this time. No, they all go with the flow. It's treated as perfectly natural. Nothing's strange about it. And it's mentioned that he and Constanta would have human lovers all the time. They'd each have flings and human affairs, and sometimes they'd share their human loves with each other before they killed them. But they're never anybody that they actually fell in love with. It was just games and toys of their victims. But this time it's different because he wants to make Alexei into a vampire, and then he does. And at first Constanta's no, we can adopt him. He can be our pet, and we'll help him in his career and stuff. We're not going to turn him into a vampire. We can all fool around with him, but that's it. And then 10 minutes later, Dracula's nope, turning him into a vampire. And she's shit. Well, I kind of wanted it anyway, so I'll do it. So they go live in Paris for their next honeymoon phase, right? The cycle of abuse, the honeymoon phase. But Alexei immediately gets annoying to Dracula because this time he's a man and he doesn't know he needs to fall into the role of the subservient wife like Constanta and Magdalena did, even though Magdalena was a very ambitious, outspoken woman, and she still had that ingrained society in her of I do defer to my husband is the boss. But Alexei's that never even occurred to him. He wasn't raised by that. Patriarchy has favored him, so he challenges Dracula, and Dracula's no, we can't do that. You have to be home by this certain time. You can't go and do these things. Alexei's why not? I want to. And he also wants to have human friends. And Dracula says, no, you cannot have human friends. I am your only friend. He wants to cut him off from society and make him his thing. But Alexei keeps doing it anyway, and he has human friends. And once he invites all his friends over to party at his house, and Dracula comes home and he's really pissed off. So he kills one of them right in front of the rest of them, and they all freak out. They're like, vampire! And they all run out into the street. Dracula's like, oopsie, now I guess we have to leave Paris and move because you've exposed us to the public that there's vampires here. And Lexi's like, it was your fault. And Dracula's like, no, it was your fault. You made me do it. So he makes them all move to the French countryside to live in this like old Gothic, decaying, dilapidated castle in the French countryside. So this is in like the late 1920s or 1930s, I guess. And there's no mention of the war at all. Either war, right? Well, they find Alexei in 1919, so I guess they missed the first war. But no mention of World War II at all. Nothing. Even though they're living in France. They're just living peacefully out in this like castle, and there's villagers there because it's such a backwater that it's still like a villager, Victorian villager era, even though it's in the 1930s by now. And Constanta, like at this point, is starting to be like, I think I've had too much. I think I don't like this anymore. It took her 800 years, right? But she's starting to be like, maybe I can do something about this. Before, she's always felt like she had no choice. She had nowhere to go. She was trapped. If she ever tried to leave him, he'd hunt her down and chase her. She knows vampires can die because he tells her that he killed his maker. So she knows it's possible, but she doesn't think she stands a chance because she's just a tiny little woman, and he is this big, powerful vampire, so much more powerful than her, even though she's 800 years at this point now. Like, before he was 1,000 and she was 0. Now he's 1,800 and she's 800. Like, the playing field's getting a little leveled, right? Oh, thank you, JRL Studios, for the $1.99. This sounds very interview-esque. I mean, it's definitely, obviously been influenced by Anne Rice, right? Like, what vampire hasn't at this point? So they're living in this creepy castle, and Dracula's being an asshole, and he keeps making Alexei cry because he wants to, like, squash out his light, too. And there's a point where Alexei's, like, so upset that he and Constanta finally sleep together and have sex. And Dracula's, like, they've never crossed that line in the relationship before, and she's not sure what to make of it, but she really liked it. She's like, I was just supposed to be motherly to him, even though I didn't really want to be. I wanted to be more, but wow. And Dracula's like, oh, he only fucked you because he couldn't find me. He actually doesn't like you that way. You're ugly. And she's like, oh, my soul is broken. It really hurts her. So they get to the point where they're having a big fight, and Dracula actually slaps Alexei. The first time he's ever raised a hand against any of them. And Constanta is so shocked and appalled that her husband actually physically hurt one of them. I'm like, you guys are vampires. Like, you slaughter people in your bed together every night, and like a slap is what does it for you. This felt very much like modern Tumblr conservative, we must have 0 problematic elements in our fiction. If someone slaps someone once, they're 100% irredeemable forever. Not that Dracula was supposed to be redeemable before that, but like, this slap is what crosses the line. Because she's like, I was fine with the emotional abuse, but I draw the line at slapping. So she tells the other 2 brides that she has a plan and she wants to kill Dracula. And the way she wants to do this is to sneak into his laboratory, because he does have a laboratory, because he has hobbies. He actually has hobbies, which is science and studying biology and stuff. And he wants to understand the difference between human and vampire, anatomy and what gives him his powers, so he can understand vampires better. And he's had this hobby for thousands of years. So while he's out hunting, she and Alexei sneak down into his laboratory and find his diary and read it. And there they find out how to kill vampires and all the like truth about vampire life and death. Meanwhile, Magdalena's on the lookout, right? So they hear Dracula come home, and Magdalena's just like flirting with him and trying to seduce him to keep him distracted. And then she and Alexei come back up, and Dracula's like, I'm not in the mood, you guys. I was out hunting and I got caught. And they're like, seriously? You got caught? You're fucking Dracula and you got caught. And he's like, yeah, so shut up. I got caught. So now the villagers are really mad because they caught me eating someone. And they're all like, well, we told you coming and living out here in this tiny village in the middle of nowhere and actually killing people here instead of just, drinking a little bit without killing them was probably not going to last very long. And he's like, shut up. It's real dumb that he's suddenly like stupid about this, but it's his pride, it's his pride. So the villagers with torches and pitchforks are coming, and Constanta's like, oh, we have to do our plan now, otherwise we won't get another chance, because if the villagers drive us out of here and we have to run off into the night, this is our chance. So their plan is to seduce Dracula. And she puts on her, like, sexiest white lacy nightie and lounges in bed with her red hair all down. And he's like, oh, you've been hot all along? Like, apparently he has, and that's why he liked her in the first place, but we never got to see it. So the three of them seduce him. They get him into bed. She sits on him, and the other two, like, pin his arms down. And she, like, whips out the sawed-off table leg she has, and she's like, I'm gonna stake you. And he's, like, starts doing his narcissistic, like, hypnotistic voodoo on her. It's not actual hypnotism, but that's what narcissism can feel like, right? Like, it can really mess with your mind, and it can really make you think that you can't live without that person. And you kind of think for a moment that she might not be able to go through with it, except she told us at the beginning of the book that she did, so we know she goes through with it. And then there's, like, a chapter break, and then another chapter happens, and then cuts back to that, and she, like, stabs him. And it's, like, fountains of blood, and she and the three of them drink his blood, which gives them, like, sudden super-duper magic powers, and they're all, like, 10 times stronger than they were before. So she takes his body, and she throws it out to the villagers, and she's like, here's your vampire, bye, guys. And then she and the brides grab up, like, all their valuables and run off into the night to start their lives over. They're free. So even though they're all besties and they love each other and they're sister wives / husband, they decide they're going to part ways and go off and, like, live their own lives for a while. So Alexei gets on a boat to go off to New York City to be on Broadway, because that's his dream. And Magdalena goes off to college in Italy to become a political scientist. And Constanta just goes off to, like, do nothing, because she has no personality or hobbies. She ends up, like, making her own little family, because all she knows is family, I guess. She has no real life. So then, story ends with, like, some high philosophy about escaping your abuser and stuff. There's a section in there where she compares him to Christ and how she doesn't want to be his Mary Magdalene anymore, and how she's tired of, like, cleaning his feet with her hair. And, you know, it's this big old Mary Magdalene allegory of waiting for him to rise from his tomb and stuff, which is weird. She's never compared herself to Mary Magdalene at all throughout the entire thing, and is treated like this great climactic, like, analogy, but it just comes out of nowhere. And the whole thing about her vampire life starting as revenge-based, I thought was going to tie into this moment of when she kills him. Like, yes, I've come full circle. Like, I got revenge on the people who destroyed my village. I'm getting my revenge on you. But it's not tied together at all either. So her, like, personality being revenge is a big missed opportunity, in my opinion. So, cut to modern times. Now we're in, like, the 2010s or 2020s. It's not specific. We just know it's modern times. Apparently she and Magdalena of Alexei have meet up every, like, 10 years or so, but now it's been 30 years since the last time they met up. And so Magdalena and Constanta go to New York to see Alexei on Broadway, and then they go back to his place after, and they all start making out, and they're going to have, like, a threesome, right? But he's really upset, because they've both kind of moved on with their lives, and he feels left behind, and he hasn't really been able to meet anyone else or make connections romantically, even though he has friends. But so they're, like, apparently they're into, like, S&M now. So Magdalena's, like, choking him, and they're, like, edging him and doing all these, like, kinky things, which, you know, it's a very sexually graphic scene in this epilogue that's been added in this version. So I guess between when the author originally wrote this and when she wrote the epilogue, she kind of upped her spice level a bit. Like, there's sex earlier in the book, but this is a level beyond it. And he likes being strangled now, and so they're doing, like, this S&M stuff. But they can tell something's wrong with him, so they're like, come on, talk to us, tell us what's wrong. And they think it's going to be, like, cute, but then he's like, you don't love me anymore. And they're like, oh, mood ruined. So, you know, they stop having sex, and then they have, like, a real talk. He's like, you've all moved on with your lives and left me behind. And they're like, no, we love you the most, I promise, I swear. I love you more than my new family, obviously. She's like, I love you with my whole heart. And I'm like, no, bitch, you have a new family now. You don't love your new family with part of your heart? But no, and appeases him. And they're like, okay, come back with us. We'll all live together now. We'll go back to living together. And then they ride off into the sunset, and they're happy in the end. This is called Book 1 of the Dowry of Blood, so I don't know what books 2 and on are going to be. Is it going to be these vampires' lives together in modern times going forward? Interesting. That would be interesting, but when you have a series where one book is like incredibly different from the rest, it's kind of weird. Like this is historical, super historical. It's set mostly in medieval times and like Tudor England, and then, you know, Decemberist Russia, and, you know, 1920s Paris. And then the rest of the books are going to be like modern times. It's going to be weird. So I hope maybe the future books will be largely flashback to like past. Maybe we'll get the same story retold from the other two brides' point of view. Maybe that might be nice. I have no idea what's I cannot see this book being part of a series. Like this to me reads completely like a standalone. So it being called book 1, I'd be really curious to see that happens. Yeah, so I kind of expected that I wasn't going to like this book going into it, but I was hoping I might be proven wrong, because I know a lot of people love this book. And I didn't dislike it. Like, the things people dislike about it, like the puritanical stuff of like, ew, it's gross because, you know, it's pedophilic and incestuous. No, that's stupid. I didn't like that the artsy, fartsy writing style that some people think is so beautiful and gorgeous did not let me immerse myself in the story. I felt no connection to the main character because she kept telling me all these things about herself, but I didn't get to live them with her. I didn't get to be there with her as she was developing these feelings. She's telling it all in hindsight. So she has a moment where this is going on, or she was like, I was falling in love with you then, but it turned out that was just manipulation. No, I would have rather been in the moment of her falling in love, and then later on had the moment where we realized it was manipulation, so then I, as the reader, could look back on the earlier moment and be like, but no, she tells me right when that first moment happens what it was. And that distance kept me from getting immersed in the story entirely. I found the other characters much more interesting than the narrator, because she made them out to be so attractive and glamorous and beautiful and sexy and wonderful that she was so jealous of them, right? Just, you know, bitches, am I right? So they seem like much more interesting people, and I wish they were the ones telling the story, because she's the one that was like, I'm just a sad little nobody. There's no reason for Dracula to even love me, but then I get mad if he tries not to because he's mine, bitch. I was like, but if you don't think you deserve him, then where's this attitude coming from? If she had been less humble, modest, self-deprecating, it would have helped. Or if, you know, she doesn't have to talk herself up. We could have had Dracula saying things about why he liked her that weren't manipulations or lies, because he has to have wanted her from a reason, right? She's not someone that he had a reason to want to be narcissistic to, like, you know, a little sister or someone that's in your life that you're gonna like do something to because they've been part of your life that way. He just picks her up off the ground somewhere. Like, she could have been anybody. Why her? There had to have been something that he genuinely was really attracted to her about her, at least at first. Even if it was just her looks. Like, if it was her looks, then have him talk about how beautiful it is and like how attracted he is to her. But we didn't even get that. He's just like, oh, I like your fighting spirit. Let me squash it out of you. Okay, so he does. Then what does he like about her for the next 800 years? Like, I don't get why he didn't kick her to the curb and like kill her like he did with all his other brides. Why did he keep her for 800 years? Just because she was like so meek and boring and loyal? He was sick of it. I don't get it. That's why I didn't feel this book. It was a quick read, but it wasn't an easy read. Like, I wasn't excited to get through it. I kept waiting for the plot to show up. And then when it did, I was like, okay, finally, all right, we got some dialogue scenes, we got some interaction, we actually got scenes where we can like sit and be there with the characters. Like, I pictured in my mind, like the banquet party scene when they first meet Magdalena. But then that would end and we go back to summarizing 200 years. So, not the style of book I like. Like, this is a style of book. For some, it is not the style of book for me. There's nothing morally reprehensible. Like, I don't know why my camera is doing that. I'm not saying if you like this book, there's something wrong with you. Like, there are books where I'm like, if you like that book, you're a creep or whatever. Like, if you like a book that's racist or something, right? There's nothing like that about this book. Don't take it personally. Don't be offended. If you think this kind of writing is beautiful and poetic and gorgeous and that's your cup of tea, I can see why you liked it. But I like a book that makes me feel part of the world, that sucks me in and makes me like along for the ride, and this is not that kind of story. Maybe it's more poetry than prose, I guess. All right, I have not been reading the chat at all. So, I'm going to scroll up a little bit, but if you ask me a question or had a thought to chime in about this book, disagree with me, want to add anything that I missed, please toss it in the chat and I will address things as I go. While you are typing, I will scroll up and see if there's anything in particular. You pictured him as a Castlevania Dracula. Like, yeah, I did too. The way Dracula is described in this book is very, very tall, like freakishly tall. And considering he's 1,000 years old or more in the 1200s, it would have made him born in like around when Jesus was born or slightly thereafter. Or maybe even older than that. Like, people weren't that tall back in the olden times. Like, they've gotten taller as time has gone on, right? So for him to be like, what, 6'8" or whatever he is, I don't know. Maybe he was only like 6'2" and she was just like a tiny little peasant wench, but he's described as freakishly tall. And so sexy, with such a handsome face that could also look so cruel. Like, she keeps telling us it's handsome, but every time she actually describes it, I was like, he looks kind of like mean and awful and not handsome at all. Like, even when he smiles, she's just like, it was a mean smile. She was just not the person to make us believe that he was charming and attractive. She was not the right person to do that. So it would have been nice if we had seen other people react to him in a way. Because, like, when he meets Alexei and Alexei's, like, fawning over him, she's like, how much time had he spent with Alexei, where Alexei had the time to fall in love with him this way? We don't get to see that. So we don't know what makes him so alluring. We didn't get to see him seduce her. So, right, he seduces Magdalena and Alexei. And that's a whole seduction process of him using his, like, narcissistic charm, abusive charm to lure them in. But we didn't get that with her. So it's hard for us to picture it and imagine it with them, because with her, he just picked her up out of the dirt and married her on the spot. There was no seduction. There was no gradual, like, winning her over. The fact that he saved her life, she was like, okay, I love you now. Instant love. Or instant, like, attraction. She had sex with him the very same night. So, yeah. It would have helped make the rest of the story make more sense if we had had a repeated pattern with her being seduced and lured. Kind of like Lucy was in Dracula, right? Like, that was a gradual seduction. Something more like that would have helped. Pretty strange how they live in dilapidated castles, yet they can perfectly intrude high society. Well, the reason they had to live in a dilapidated castle the last time is because after almost 1,000 years of, like, high society living, the money was starting to run out. And I'm just like, wait. He just had, like, a pile of money that he was gradually burning through over thousands of years, and now he's getting to the end of it. It wasn't, like, invested. It wasn't in banks. He wasn't, like, accruing income. He wasn't living off the interest or anything. He was just gradually burning through his money. This is really stupid. Like, even if he's too stupid to know that, he has so many, like, connected friends, and, like, even Magdalena was so connected. She could have taught him about, like, investment accounts or something, but nope. He was just gradually running out of money the entire time. And as a vampire, you think they'd, like, steal money from everyone they killed, right? But nope, they were just running out from his original ancient warlord coffers. So yeah, that's why they need a dilapidated castle at the end, just as an excuse for it to be so gothic. Like, there could have been a better excuse, I think. Oh, Karnstein, you said this bit wasn't in the original release. Which bit were you talking about? You said it at 9:17. What time is it now? 9:28. So you said it about 10 minutes ago. What bit were you talking about? Joker asks if there's a version of Pride and Prejudice with vampires. Yes, but we are not ready to talk about other things yet. We're still talking about Dowry of Blood, so ask me that again later. Yeah, I know the sexy epilogue wasn't in the original release. I was wondering if there were other parts as well. Not that I told you all the parts I read, obviously. But the sexy epilogue is only a few pages, so there's no way it could have accounted for the 2 extra hours of audiobook. We see Dracula scout out Magdalena and Alexei in advance of changing them. Do we think Dracula maybe scouted out Constanta as a young woman and chooses her before the town got attacked? I don't think so. Because I feel like if he was, he would have been courting her. He wouldn't just have been spying on her and picking her and being like, that's the one I want. Because it's not like he gets to the town that's burned down and is like, oh, the one I wanted has been slain. I better save her. He's just like walking along and he's just like, hey, there's a hot redhead lying on the ground. She's got like a spark in her eyes that makes me think she's interesting. Turns out she is not interesting. I'm going to make her a vampire. And then he does. There seemed to be absolutely zero prior recognition in him. And, like, I don't see a reason why he would have faked that or lied about it. And, like, if there was something about her ahead of time that had drawn him that made him, like, want to court her, we never find out what it was. Absolutely don't find out. Samira, does the book feel less planned and more like a stream of consciousness? The way it's written, like, wait, this really doesn't make sense. I mean, a bit in that maybe how the author originally wrote it, but the point of a book is that it is a finished product. Like, you go back and you edit that stuff and you make it make sense. Like, that's what editors are for, right? Now. He just picked her up the same way you pick up a nice looking rock. Yes, that would make sense if he did that all the time, right? But she's the one rock that he keeps for 800 years. Like, he doesn't do that with anyone else. And even if that's how he picked up his brides before, they didn't last 800 years. Like, he went through them fast. What made her different? Why was she around for 800 years? Like, it feels like it wasn't fully thought through. Try saying that 5 times fast. How do I feel about this depiction of Dracula? I mean, I didn't think it was bad. Like, showing him as a husband and the way he might relate to his brides, I felt was perfectly Dracula-ish. I don't think Dracula should be slapping around his brides, so I wasn't surprised that he was never physically violent and that he had ways of controlling them. Because, you see his one interaction with his brides in the book where they're just like, you don't know how to love. And he's like, what? I know love. Here's your baby, bitches. Shows that, like, maybe they used to have love and they've gradually fallen out of love, and it's just, like, sad. He was fine. I don't get why he was into Constanta at all. That seemed like a hole in his character development and his character depiction. And I don't get why this Dracula would have done the whole Lucy Mina thing. Why he would have moved to England. Like, there's a part before the 1800s, like 17 something, or maybe early 1800s, where they're living in London. They like have a whole London lifestyle. Then they leave London and go elsewhere. And then they must have come back to London and been there during the whole Bram Stoker story. But, like, there was no point where he was back in his crumbling Transylvania castle where Jonathan could have come there and done that whole thing. Like, that, there was no way that would have fit, because he leaves the crumbling Transylvania castle in the 1300s during the Black Plague and never goes back. Like, it just wouldn't work. None of that would have worked with this. So whatever the AU version of Stoker's story was in this, I really would want to know, because if she's changed it that much, that's a whole different story, but maybe has some same elements of it. Like, there's a Van Helsing, and there's Harkers, and there's Mina, and there's Lucy. I would want to know that version, because it's not going to be anything like it was in Stoker's book. You hated the book? It wasn't true to the original novel? Yes, it was not true to the original novel. That's not why I disliked it. But if you want something true to the original of this novel, this is not it. I don't need a spin-off or retelling to be true to the original novel at all. I just need it to like make sense within itself. And this book had a lot of things that had me questioning why these characters were doing these things this way, because it felt shallow and underdeveloped. I think it would have made more sense if they mentioned that Constanta reminded him of his wife and that's why he keeps her around, but then I feel like the book is a soap opera. I mean, you know, any reason for him to be like, you dirt bitch, you're the one I want to be my next wife, and maybe I'll get bored of you in 20 years and kill you, but yet he keeps her for 800 years. Like, there has to be something. And like, when he's got Constanta and Magdalena and they're taking them around, he always introduces Constanta as his wife. Like, she is number one wife. She is HBIC, and Magdalena is just introduced as his daughter or his ward, even though they have to be exactly the same age. She still gets that title of wife. I don't get why she gets that respect, why she gets that title, why she's treated with that reverence from his point of view. I don't understand why he treats her that way. There's nothing in the book to show us. Yeah, Harker incident being an easy Easter egg is probably true. And that's why before I read that Easter egg moment where she mentioned the Harkers, I had that revelation. I was like, oh, this is not Dracula. This is Dracula inspired, but this author has come up with her own characters, her own vampire family, and that's what this is. And I would have liked that better. Having to force it back and being like, nope, it was Dracula all along. That nothing matches up with the original, I thought was less good. How did Dracula become a vampire in this? Who turned him? He was turned. He did have a vampire sire who wanted to control him the same way he controls his wives, but because, you know, he's like a badass Dracula, he wasn't going to stand for that, and he killed his sire almost immediately, drank his blood, got his power, and ran off and scampered off to do his own thing. We don't know who that guy was or why he chose Dracula at all. We just know that it was at least 1,000 years before 1200 AD. Towards the end of the book, he was showing a greater dislike for Constanta. Well, I didn't think it was a greater dislike. I think we were just getting actual literal moments of scenes on the page that we weren't getting before. Like, she keeps skimming over so much before that made it sound like this same kind of dislike was there all along. Like, there's a scene very early in their relationship where they've only been together less than 100 years, where she's asking him questions about his science experiments. And she says that if she ever asked more than 2 questions in a row, he would get irritated with her and just start getting mad at her. Like, she couldn't be like, oh, why do you have a telescope? Oh, what do you like to look at with that telescope? Oh, why do you want to look at the moon? Like, he would start getting mad at her. Like, stop asking me questions. You know, it was there from the beginning that he just couldn't stand her. Like, she was obnoxious to him and he couldn't even like stand being around her even that early. Why did he keep her for so long? What did I think of the choice to never name Dracula? It was fine. I thought it was a nice little like gimmick. You know, it was cool. Wasn't bothered by it. Did she maybe write an original vampire story in order to make more money she tied to Dracula after the fact? No, I don't think so. This definitely feels like she was thinking Dracula all along, but didn't want to have to like be married to the original, so just did whatever she wanted with it, which is fine. Totally fine. I think the marketing of it was misleading, but that's not her fault. That is the publisher's fault, the marketing's fault. Yeah, a lot of people thought Alexei was going to be like the famous Prince Alexei from Russian political history, but no, he was just a guy with that name. Just like a normal guy. Oh, I finished the bottle. Aren't you proud of me? Cheers. Rights to Dracula? Who said something about the rights to Dracula? Yes, Dracula's public domain. Anyone can write books about Dracula. Anyone at all. You are perfectly legally free to do so. Dracula is like the most public domain person in the history of spin-offs. Dracula has been used in more things than any other character in the history of characters. We were just talking about this on Discord. like when you think of all the Dracula movies, all the TV shows where Dracula like pops up as a character, all the cartoons, all the TV commercials, every single like book that has a like, and Dracula was there too, you know, comic strips, random like pictures of Dracula, depictions of Dracula, like Sunday newspaper comics where like Dracula's in the background. Like he has appeared more times in media than any character in the history of anything else. And Sherlock Holmes is second to that, also very high, but not as high as Dracula. Sherlock Holmes does have more movies, but not more like general everything. Now you want Dracula versus Sherlock? Well, we read that book earlier in this, I was about to say earlier this year, but it was last year. Time has no meaning. There's a lot of Dracula versus Sherlocks. In fact, when we read the one we read, it was voted for against several others that we still have yet to read on our vampire bookshelf. So, you know, when you have public domain characters like Dracula, Frankenstein, Sherlock Holmes, Jekyll and Hyde, Dorian Gray, all those like classic era monsters, Phantom of the Opera, that's my favorite one. You can mash up anything you want. Yes, you can make Dracula kiss anyone you want, perfectly legally. Dracula versus the Batman movie, which I have reviewed on my channel. Have you watched my video about Dracula versus the Batman? I will link it in the cardy things that you put up over the video. For anyone who's watching this after the fact and not live with us right now. Dracula versus Beyonce. See, Beyonce is not public domain. If she wanted to do that herself, she could. She could do anything she wanted with Dracula. Anything she wanted with Dracula. But we could not. The big thing lately about public domain is that Great Gatsby has just entered the public domain last year, right? So everyone who had their like Great Gatsby fan fiction ready to roll released it last year. It was like this big old thing. So Dracula and Gatsby could kiss if you wanted them to. It's always about kissing with people, right? The way copyright law works for stuff like that is 70 years after the death of the author it becomes public domain. The way it works for modern stuff nowadays for characters that are owned by corporations is very different. So like when Walt Disney died, everyone was like, okay, 70 years after he's dead, we all get to use Mickey Mouse however we want, right? But the Disney Corporation is like, no, he belongs to us. And they found a way to like legally do that, right? To keep renewing that copyright. So, you know, you're looking at superhero characters now, which are all owned by corporations and not just by their original authors. So you can't do anything you want with superheroes without violating copyright and potentially getting sued. Winnie the Pooh isn't public domain because Disney, I was going to say bought it, but I bet they didn't even buy it. I bet they just took it. I want to do whatever I want with Anne Rice vampires, not Dracula. Well, you know what? I do whatever I want with Anne Rice vampires every day. You can do that. You just can't make money off of it. You can do what you want with any character if you're doing it just for yourself, for free, on the internet. You just can't sell a book to a major publisher about it without violating copyright law. But you can do what you want on AO3 or fanfiction.net. That is legal. That is fair use. You just can't make money off of it. Does Dracula exist in the Riceverse? Dracula the book exists in the Riceverse, but he's not a real person. It's just a book. Winnie the Pooh is public domain. The original version that's naked is. The Disney version with the red shirt is not. Oh, you just said the same thing I said. Bye, Patricia. Thanks for joining us. The original Mickey Mouse is going to be public domain next year, I think. So it's like a very specific visual version of it. I too like the Brad Pitt Tom Cruise movie. I just did a video about that movie recently. You should watch it. It's on my channel. I interviewed one of the actors in it who told me all about what it was like working with Tom Cruise. I think you can make a fictional universe where Rice vampires and Dracula can exist alongside each other. I mean, you could. You just couldn't make money off of it. Any other thoughts or feelings or questions you want to share about Dowry of Blood? You want to say something you felt and just have me repeat it out loud so everyone else can hear it too? Say it now, and we will move on. You're surprised no one has done the Cthulhu mythos and Dracula in the same book. Are you sure they haven't? Are you sure? I would double check that. I can't think of anything offhand, but I would double check that. Someone asked if the OG Weird Sisters bride / Lucy mindless thralls are simply dominated by their blood hunger. I would say that about Lucy from what we get to see of her, but the brides in Dracula's castle that Jonathan interacts with seem to have more individual personalities. Definitely hungry. Sorry, I'm gonna sneeze. Hold on, I'm gonna mute myself. You don't need to hear me. Never mind, I guess I'm fine. But yeah, when they have that conversation with Dracula about how he doesn't know how to love and stuff, that made me feel like they weren't just mindless. You know, the nature of love was a philosophical thing that they thought about. They were complex individuals, I'd say. And I feel like Lucy would have gotten that way eventually when she got past her, like, adjustment period as a new vampire, you know? There's a Cthulhu versus Dracula comic series. See? She knows. You should link it so people can find it. How did I feel about the presentation of polyamory in the novel? I mean, given that it was an abusive, toxic relationship, I don't think it was a healthy representation of polyamory, but I thought it was a realistic one. Like, I didn't think it was, you know, done badly. It was realistic. I don't think it was like something you would want to model your own polyamory after, but I thought it was valid. I like that gender just meant nothing and they just like reacted normally, like everyone was, yeah, of course we like that guy, it's fine. Is there a version of Dracula's brides that aren't white? Not that I know offhand, but I'm pretty sure there must be. Magdalena, because in this she's a Spaniard, is described as having brown skin. So she may have had, like, you know, African ancestry or something, like many Spaniards do and did at that time. But there are no actual people of color in this, though many people are described as having brown skin. All right. Cthulhu versus Dracula. Google it. Is there a movie about a bride that's African American coming up this year? Is there? I have not heard of that. Do you know what it's called? Sorry, the sneeze that didn't want to sneeze is still like tickling my nose. Have I read better Brides of Dracula books that actually have a retelling of Dracula's story from their perspective? No. The only other Brides of Dracula books I've read have all been about the brides' lives before and up to marrying Dracula, and then they usually end there. Though I haven't read many, right? I would like to see a retelling of Stoker's Dracula story from the bride's point of view, and I actually like outlined a novel of that myself about 15 years ago that I thought I'd write one day, but so much to write, so little time. It didn't end up going anywhere. Have I ever read Neil Gaiman's A Stain Emerald or the Graveyard Book? I read the Graveyard Book, but not the other one. The Invitation. Yes, thank you. I have heard of that. Yes. It came out last year. Well, I didn't watch it. I don't get to watch things very much anymore. Am I planning to read The Passage by Justin Cronin someday? I have it. It is on the shelf behind me. It was sent to me by one of you as consideration for the Vampire Book Club. And I have put it up to a vote for Vampire Book Club before, and it did not win that vote, but it will go up again for another vote, and we may read it for a future book club session. What did I think of the Alexei Constanta relationship? I thought it was cute. I liked how it developed and changed. I like that it had dynamics, unlike with Magdalena, where she started off immediately thinking she was hot and wanting to bang her. With Alexei, she started off in a more like protective point of view, and then eventually it became romantic. So I like that it had development. I did not find it weird or creepy or off-putting or gross at all, like so many people did, because it was a very gothic relationship, and you know I am here for that. Yeah, Superman has definitely fought Dracula. We talked about in the server. The server being the Discord server where this book club is hosted. If you're not in the Discord server, the link is in the description. Please join. You can talk about vampires with us all day, every day. Have I checked out Undeath by Philip Rice? No, I have not. We should definitely do Dracula's Bride's retelling for book club again sometime. Yes, we should. This book won by a landslide against the other two Dracula's Bride books I put up, because it is the new hotness and everyone was curious about it and everyone heard of it. But there are others, and we should see how those are like. No, it was not Alexei Romanov. That's what people wished he was. But he was not Alexei Romanov. He was just a dude named Alexei in Russia in 1919. Storm was the pride of Dracula and the X-Men. Oh, good for her. Good for her. Am I really going to sneeze this time? Let's see. Let's see if I really sneeze this time. Nope. What webcomic are you talking about? Oh. Undeath by Philip Rice. No, I have not even heard of that. Thank you for the recommendation. We are all brides of Dracula in one way or another. I mean, yes. Very true. How old is Dracula in the Bram Stoker novel? It is unspecified. He is not supposed to be Vlad III, Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. He's not supposed to be that guy. He was inspired by him and several other voivodes of the time, but he's not supposed to be that guy. He's supposed to be more ancient and older and a child, like a student of Satan from like the school of Satan. Satan had like a school back in those days that like you could go to and become a student of Satan, and that's who Dracula is supposed to be. So older than Vlad III, so older than 1400s, but probably not by much. Beckett is a bride of Dracula and Vampire the Masquerade Lord. Good for him. Good for him. Yep, Sholomance, that's the one. Speaking of Dracula, our next book is also a Dracula book. 2 Dracula books in a row? Wow. So, I put up a vote, like I often do for book club, between 3 books. And this time the vote was between books that came out in 2022. So, new books that have gotten a lot of buzz, that were pretty popular. And of the 2 books that I put up, 2 were tied. These 2 tied. And the only reason why I picked this one over this one was because it was shorter. Like when my vote comes down to being the deciding factor, I always pick the shorter one. This book, which almost won, is called Belle Morte. It is a Wattpad book. It is book 1 in series. It is a young adult book. I think it's a modern setting book. Yeah, so this is a contemporary book about like vampire high society. And since it was so popular, I will put it up for another vote for another time. Maybe when we're voting for young adult books. But the one I picked was this, Reluctant Immortals, which is a Dracula book. Came out last year, and I've heard a lot about it. And I want to tell you about it by reading you the back cover. So you didn't even know I had this book. People in Discord have been recommending this book to me for a while, and I had put it on my wish list, hoping I might get it for Christmas, but I didn't. But then, one of you sent it to me. Thank you. And it is in the pile that I have stacked up over there for my next Vampire Library video, which is getting pretty high. That pile's about knee high so far. So as soon as I get a big enough pile, I will tell you about all my new books vampire books, and this will be in that pile. But because it is already up for Vampire Book Club even before then, I'm going to tell you about it now. Maybe this time I'll actually sneeze. If I hold a tissue to my nose long enough, the sneeze just dies. I haven't done woman eating. I just actually heard about that for the first time very recently. Okay. So the blurb on the back of this says it's for fans of Mexican Gothic, which sold me immediately. I loved Mexican Gothic. I read it for my In Real Life book club, which we just read speculative fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and the like, not necessarily vampires. So we could read vampires. But the whole reason I started this vampire book club was because my real life book club didn't want to read all the vampire books I wanted to read. They wanted to read other kinds of sci-fi and fantasy. So hence why I have 2 book clubs now. So for fans of Mexican Gothic, from 3-time Bram Stoker award-winning author Gwendolyn Kist. I don't know what she won the Bram Stoker Award for. I know nothing of her other books. Comes a novel inspired by the untold stories of forgotten women in classic literature. Lucy Westenra, a victim of Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't think Lucy Westenra is a forgotten woman. I think Lucy is very well remembered and utilized in media. I mean, maybe forgotten by the normies. People, I guess, remember Mina more than Lucy, but nobody forgets Lucy. And Bertha Mason, Mr. Rochester's addict-bound wife in Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. So, if you are unfamiliar with Jane Eyre, you should read it. It is an excellent Gothic novel. Not as excellent or as Gothic as Wuthering Heights by Charlotte Bronte's sister, Emily Bronte. If you want to read a really Gothic novel, read Wuthering Heights. It actually has a supernatural element with ghosts and hauntings and stuff. Jane Eyre does not have any supernatural element, but it is Gothic in that it has horror elements to it. So in the book, Jane is a governess, which means she's a teacher for fancy rich kids who get to teach in their own home, like an at-home tutor. And she goes off to this very Gothic, creepy mansion out in the middle of nowhere to teach this creepy man's, not daughter, his adopted daughter, French and stuff. And she's there in this house teaching this kid. Well, the creepy, not old, but older man who lives there is falling in love with her, and it's very eerie and romantic. And then she eventually falls in love with him. But meanwhile, all this weird stuff keeps happening. She keeps seeing this crazy lady in her dreams, and then her room gets set on fire. And turns out that the guy there had a woman living in his attic who's mentally unhealthy, unwell, insane, in that she likes setting things on fire, and she has to be kept prisoner, otherwise she's a danger to herself. And she's his wife, and he's already married, so the fact that he wants to marry Jane Eyre is illegal, and it's a bigamous thing, and she's my religion, when he tries, and then, it ruins her whole romance. So the whole wife in the attic, the crazy wife in the attic trope came from Jane Eyre. And this woman is seen as the villain of the story. She's seen as a monster. She's seen as inhuman. And a total cockblocker, right? So that's why she's seen as a forgotten woman. The book ends with her dying. So therefore, the man is now no longer married. And he and Jane Eyre actually can get married. And they live happily ever after. Even though he's gone blind, and I think he lost the ability to walk. Yeah, he gets punished, right? He deserves to get punished for trying to be a bigamist and a jerk. So Bertha Mason is his wife in the attic, the crazy one. Reluctant Immortals is a horror novel that looks at 2 men, Mr. Rochester, who's Bertha's husband, and Dracula, and 2 women who survived them. Except they didn't. In both books, Lucy and Bertha very much do not survive their men. Do not survive. But apparently in this book they do. Bertha and Lucy, who are now undead immortals. They are residing in Los Angeles in 1967 when Rochester and Dracula make a shocking return. I guess Rochester is now also immortal somehow. What happened to Jane? Like, Rochester married Jane in like the 1830s, right? So I guess by 1967, Jane's dead and he's just like immortal and like a guy now. They make a shocking return in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. Oh, neat. That's like the super fun district. The gay district. Combining elements of historical and gothic fiction with a modern perspective. 1967 is considered modern? In a tale of love and betrayal and coercion. Reluctant Immortals is the lyrical and harrowing journey of two women as they bravely claim their own destiny in a man's world. You know, this sounds very similar to the book we just read, though hopefully with a bit more empowerment and a bit less sitting around for 800 years moping. Yeah, maybe he locked Jane in the attic. You're pretty sure LGBT was in the tags for this on Goodreads? So you think Lucy and Bertha are a couple? That would be nice. I would like for them to be a couple. They deserve it. These are the reviews on the back. This is a black rose petal crushed for generations in a moldering Victorian novel. One that's now steadily trickling blood down the spine, those drops collecting not in a cupped palm but in the sharp corners of a mouth. Makes it sound really gothic, right? I don't really picture gothic for 1967 Los Angeles and San Francisco. That doesn't really strike me as a very gothic setting, but according to this guy, it's gothic. The perfect blend of darkness and dark humor. By turns biting, heartbreaking, and uplifting. I am appreciative that it has humor. It did, like, it gives that vibe, right? Like, there's got to be some tongue-in-cheek, some lightness to this, some kind of humor. This book is glorious justice for the characters who have been sidelined, while the villain's story gets told and retold for decades. I loved every page. I don't think Lucy Westenra's gotten sidelined. I guess Bertha gets sidelined, though there is a book, a very famous book about her origin story, like Jane Eyre published fan fiction called Why Sargasso Sea, which you should read. It is a modern classic. It's pretty good. The 70s were pretty gothic, yes, with all their bell bottoms and pot smoking. Brown and orange and avocado green. So gothic. Keast is a genius of critical entertainment. Oh, this is critical. That'll be interesting. I like to see it if it's doing some sort of like literary deep dive. Oh! Gwendolyn Kiss wrote The Rust Maidens. Okay, cool. I haven't read The Rust Maidens, but it has been highly recommended to me, and I do have it on my shelf downstairs in my non-vampire library. I'm excited to read this book. Sorry, I need to find my phone because the air conditioner just came on and I have to turn it off because it's blowing cold air on me. In the meantime, you can look at my phone's fabulous case. The one sad thing about this case is that it does not work with my magnet charger, which I did not realize when I ordered it for cheap on Amazon. Sadness. This phone is my new phone that I got for free by switching my cell phone plan to a different provider. It's got a very fancy camera on it, which I intend to use to take pictures of my art so that I can list my art on Etsy and, like, sell my art. That's my plan, now that I have a fancy phone. Jim Morrison of The Doors had heavy gothic sensitivities. Interesting that you say that, since Anne Rice based The Vampire Lestat on him. By The Vampire Lestat, I mean the book, not so much the guy, though obviously the guy in the book. When she decided to have Lestat become a rock star, it was directly inspired by Jim Morrison. Disco jumpsuit, so gothic, right? All those sparkles. If the series ended at Queen of the Damned, do you think it did a good job with its ending? Sure. I mean, it felt complete. Didn't feel like it was lacking. It was a good ending. I'm glad it didn't, though. Oh, thank you, Ace Wingate, for the $4.99. I'm gay. Fell in love with a guy who still loves his ex, but his ex is in love with me. I realize we are Lula's and our it's a mess. Oh no, Ace Wingate. I'm so sorry. I hope it's a fun mess and not a sad mess. So in an alternative way, Val Kilmer was a stat. I bet Anne Rice would have loved that. She would have loved it. Fright Night 1985. What about Fright Night 1985? No, it's not fun at all. I'm so sorry. I hope it gets better. I'm so sorry. You're all miserable. Get therapy. Get couples therapy or triples therapy. Oh, LGBT isn't in the tags? So what are Bertha and Lucy even doing together if they're not a couple? Just like eating ice cream? I don't know. I'm guessing Lucy is a vampire, but I don't know that Bertha is also a vampire, and I don't know that Rochester is a vampire. I don't know what kind of immortals they are. The fact that it's called Reluctant Immortals and not Reluctant Vampires makes me think that we have a variety of immortals, which is intriguing to me. I want to know what other kind of immortals are there with our vampires. And the fact that it has a very like neon, pretty, colorful cover instead of like a gothic cover makes me think that they don't want to advertise it as gothic, so that's probably not as much of a draw as it should be. So yeah, female besties needs book 2. That is very true. That is very true. Not everything has to be romantic. Fine. Maybe Bertha is Lucy's Renfield. That would explain the madness. That would be interesting. Though I hope she's like treated deeply, not like just as a shallow, crazy lady, right? Ghosts? Are ghosts considered immortal, though? I don't think ghosts are considered immortal. I think they're just considered dead. Sorry, there's a strange noise coming from the... Why is my camera zoomed out like that? What is going on? Am I going to reveal Renfield when it comes out? You ask in all caps. I'm definitely going to see it. And then if I have anything interesting to say about it, I'll review it. But I don't like reviewing things unless I have like a point to make. Like I'm not just going to review and be like, yes, it was good or it was bad. I want to use it as a basis for making some kind of point, some like political or artistic point, because that is what media means to me personally. The ghost immortal or not? Let's ask the cameraman. Good point. No, my camera's got ghosts. Like, if I go like this, will it go over there? Yes, it will. You could see my curtain, my purple curtain, like in the Raven poem. Deep, dark, uncertain fluttering of each purple curtain. If I go over this way far enough, do you get to see my, like, side of the room that's slightly messy? Nope. Stops there. Well, that's good. You don't need to see the messy side of my room. You peeked in on some of the sets? I know they were filming Renfield in New Orleans at the same time that they were filming Interview with the Vampire, because my friends who were down there, who were in Interview with the Vampire, they got jobs as characters in that movie, said that they saw the Renfield filming going on at the same time. Very cool. When I saw the Renfield trailer, I didn't get anything particularly New Orleans about it, so I'm curious how that's going to factor in and whether it's going to be a big deal or just because it's cheap to film in New Orleans or something, right? You wish you could write your own vampire story. Too bad you have no talent for this sort of literature. Take a class. Take some classes. You can learn. It's a skill. Oh, thank you for telling me I look fab. I tried new eye makeup that I'm not. It's a very different look than I'm used to. Dana, hi! I didn't realize that was you until you just said that. Danae, sorry, I totally mispronounced your name right now. Blame the wine. I'm gonna have some more. You guys should know Danae. She is a fabulous person. If you ever go to New Orleans, do something that she's like set up. She sets up things in New Orleans all the time. Yeah, people mispronounce my name all the time too. They call me Eliza or Alyssa all the time. The actress in Renfield seems to have been typecast as psychic who gets weirdness explained to her. Not a bad role to have. What would Lestat's answer be to when you feel unimportant? I don't get what the question is. Like, how to stop feeling unimportant, or why do I feel unimportant, or cheer me up because I feel it. Like, what exactly is the question? I bet I could tell you Lestat's answer if I know exactly what the question is. Because I'm in his head. I just read a lot of Anne Rice biographies. How to stop feeling unimportant? Get out more. Engage with the world. Get outside of your own head and look at the people around you. That's what he would say. I don't know that I would like that advice personally, but that's what he would say. What is the first Anne Rice book to read? Interview with a Vampire? Unless you don't want vampires. If you want a non-vampire first Anne Rice book to read, I'd say Feast of All Saints, probably. Cry to Heaven if you're into gay stuff. And opera, which I am. As a theater person, I really like Cry to Heaven. The Mummy, if you just want something fun. Yes, touch grass. No, Lestat wouldn't say touch grass. He would say touch people. I did not know there was going to be a Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires TV show. I did not know that. I guess I'm most excited about that. That's so cool. I'm curious how they're going to make an entire TV show out of it. Is it just going to be a TV show based in that universe with its own stories? Or is it going to be like a single season thing and then they spin off into more? A stupid movie about Renfield with Nicolas Cage coming. Yes, that is the very one we were talking about. It looks stupid in the same way that What We Do in the Shadows is stupid. So if you like What We Do in the Shadows, very absurdist comedy vibe, then you would like Renfield, I think. If you don't like What We Do in the Shadows, then you probably won't like Renfield if you want your vampires to be serious business all the time. Oh yes, Pride and Prejudice and Vampires. Okay, I don't actually have a book to recommend to you because the books I've read are bad. So the first one I think of is Mr. Darcy Vampire, which is a sequel to Pride and Prejudice, where Mr. Darcy has been a vampire all along. And now that Elizabeth has agreed to marry him, we're going to start on that story. So in this story, like, he and Elizabeth are going off, they're about to get married. But then he gets a letter, a concerning letter that tells him, hey, dude, I know you're a vampire, and I know you're about to get married to this human chick, but if you have sex with her, bad things will happen. So you shouldn't marry her. And Darcy's like, but I want to marry her. I'll just marry her and never have sex with her. There, that'll solve the problem. So he does. And then Elizabeth spends the whole book being like, I'm undesirable and he doesn't love me because he doesn't want to have sex with me. And Darcy spends the whole book being like, I want her so bad, but I can't have sex with her because I'm a vampire. And it's a whole bunch of miscommunication. It's... Besides that being a dumb plot, it's just not very well written, you know, just kind of like, feels like it was quickly churned out. That's the one I've read. There are others besides that one. That's the one I've read. I miss a newbie vampire from season 1 of What We Do in the Shadows too. I am very sad that they dropped that character and didn't do more with her. I don't think Renfield will be very much like Dracula Dead and Loving It, because I don't think it's going to be a parody or a pastiche of Dracula tropes or Dracula film tropes. I think it's going to be an exploration of a person who works for a vampire, like a Renfield character. Basically like Guillermo from What We Do in the Shadows. It's going to be his story and, you know, how he gets through it. But with Dracula in this movie being a much more formidable vampire than the vampires in What We Do in the Shadows, who are, you know, not formidable at all. What do I think of Louis' resolution to feeling unimportant? I feel like Louis would be like, I deserve to feel unimportant. This is correct, and I deserve this, and you shouldn't resolve it because you don't deserve to have it resolved. Except for maybe late canon Louis. He's much less emo. But like core Louis, that's what he would say. What are my thoughts on What We Do in the Shadows? It is tons of fun. I enjoy it thoroughly. I really love the movie. I did a review on the movie. It's actually my highest viewed video on YouTube. My review of What We Do in the Shadows, a movie. Love that movie. One of the best vampire movies I've ever seen. Like top 5 vampire movies ever. What We Do in the Shadows is up there. The TV show is pretty good and pretty fun. I like some seasons more than others. As Paul says, season 3 was nothing but dick jokes. Season 4 was a little more touching. Season 2 is probably its best season. There's gonna be season 5, right? Or have they not announced it yet? There's gonna be season 5, right? You'd watch anything Nick Cage is in? He is over the top ridiculous. But I'd watch anything that Nicholas Hoult is in. He's the main reason I want to watch Renfield, because he's hilarious. I loved him in The Great, playing the horrible despot. And I want to see him be Renfield. He is so funny. They announced season 5. Yes, thank you. Okay. Whew. Anne Rice or Brahma? What's a Brahma? I guess that's my answer. Oh, Bram Stoker. Anne Rice, obviously. Duh. I'm scrolling back up because I think I've missed so many other things. Anne Rice or Jane Artery? You asked me earlier. I don't know who Jane Artery is. I mean, my answer to any of these questions is probably going to be Anne Rice no matter what, right? Scrolling. You can ask me more questions. You can ask me questions about Dowry of Blood. You can ask me questions about Reluctant Immortals. You ask me questions about Anne Rice, because that's what we always end up talking about at the end of these streams, right? It always becomes Anne Rice o'clock here on Vampire Book Club 2. We can talk about something that's not Anne Rice. Just saying. It's always possible. I am also hyped about Ari Aster's Nosferatu and The Last Voyage of the Demeter. I am also hyped about those. And, what's the, space western Dracula that's coming out? Hyped about that as well. If I will tackle Star Trek Salt Vampires, I've never seen it. Have I done a Love at First Bite review? I have not. I'm not even sure I've seen Love at First Bite. That may be one that I have missed. Space Western Dracula. Let me find it. I was just looking at it the other day. I'm Googling. Yeah, Chloe Zhao is making Dracula Western in space, and it's been talked about being made for 2 years now. And then it was like scrapped and it was dead in the water. It wasn't being made, but it's just come back into like the press again. Like Chloe Zhao's movie is still happening. So a space western Dracula by an Asian woman. Very exciting. I mean, space western is just like Firefly, right? Like what besides Firefly is space western? I'm sure there's some things. Again, this news does not want to come. Cowboy Bebop, there's one. Yeah, space westerns. Trigun. Space cowboy. See, it doesn't say space cowboy. It's just space western. Dracula western in space. Sci-fi western remake. Yeah, so this was announced at the same time as another Dracula remake was announced. I forget what the other one was, but this was much more interesting. And Chloe Zhao, who is the director of Eternals, the Marvel show, is behind it. And then they told us it was dead and it wasn't happening, but then, like, what, last week? 2 days ago? It was announced again, so... Oh, Mandalorian. Yeah. I wouldn't say all of Star Wars, but definitely parts of Star Wars, yes. Love at First Spice is unfortunately rather racist. Well, it'll give me something to talk about. Have I watched the anime Black Butler? Yes, I watched the first season and started on the second season several years ago. And then just within the past couple months, I was talking to Paul and I was like, we should watch Black Butler and we should start over again from the beginning because I don't remember very well. So we did. And we've been watching the first season of Black Butler just recently. It's like every other week when we have time to sit down and watch things is what we watch. This is not good. This is not the champagne. This is another bottle of wine that I had left over from my In Real Life book club, which was just like a basic rosé, I think. It's fine, but compared to the champagne, it's not very good. Guys, what time is it? See, my microphone is blocking my clock. I can't see. Oh, it's 10:19. So late. Is Black Butler good? If you like anime and anime tropes, yeah. If it's not like, if that's not your thing, you'd probably find it annoying. I have not heard any news on Last Voyage of the Demeter recently. None at all. Do I get a headache when I drink? If I don't hydrate enough, if I don't drink enough water. If I mix weird alcohols together. Try not to get a headache when I drink. I usually strategically avoid it. I should try the manga Black Butler. It's better than the anime. Oh, good. One of you sent me the manga of Death Note, and I want to read that first because I like things about death. I love you too, Carson Smith. Writing projects. Why are you nagging me about my writing, Mom? Writing when I'm good. No, I write every day. I write tons of things. I write lots of vampire stories anonymously on the internet. But I know the writing projects that you want to know about are my published books, and I don't have news on that right now. Because I've been busy writing vampire stories on the internet. Don't give me spoilers for Death Note. I haven't read it or watched it at all. So, it's interesting that we're reading 2 Dracula books in a row. We've read quite a few Dracula books in this vampire book club. We read Dracula's Child, we read Anno Dracula, we read Dracul, we read the Dracula tape, we read Vampire Hunter D, who's basically Dracula, right? I was going to say Helsing, but no, we didn't read Helsing. I read that by myself. Lots of Dracula. Dracula's public domain. Anyone can write about him, right? So next month for Vampire Book Club, I'm thinking we should read something that's not Dracula. So if you have suggestions for what type of book you want to read, what genre, what area, what theme, let me know in the Discord server for the book club suggestions so I can frame our next read around a theme and pick 3 or 4 books that we can vote between based on that theme. Don't just suggest books, suggest types of books. If you suggest a book and it's not one that I own on the shelf you see behind me, it is not eligible for book club. The point of book club is to help me read all these books. You see 2 shelves behind me, right? There's also another one over there that you see in my videos, and there's also another one over there that you used to see in my videos before it got too small and I had to move it over there. Wow, the camera knows. But it's not going to show the shelves. So yeah, I have 4 bookcases full of vampire books in this room alone, and several more that don't fit on the bookcases yet. So the point of the Vampire Book Club is to read those books, for you to read them with me, to motivate me to read them, because reading books alone is sometimes hard. Am I okay with short stories suggestions? Like anthologies with short stories, yes, not like single short stories. And we have read short story anthologies for this book club. We read Slay, Stories of the Vampire Noir. We read Love at First Bite, which was a young adult anthology. And I think one other anthology we read. Yeah. But not a single short story. That's too short to read for a book club. We need to read multiple stories. Your thing is suggesting Neil Gaiman's The Glass Apple. How short is that? Is it just a story or is it like a novella? I think The Glass Apple is actually included in one of my short story compilations. So I can find that compilation that has The Glass Apple in it, and then we can read that entire compilation. What is the scariest novel or story I've read? It doesn't have to involve vampires. I would probably say Let the Right One In, which does involve vampires. I don't read a lot of scary books. Not that I'm like opposed to scary books. It's just not like I like reading books that are more about like character relationships, right? And interactions. And if I read a scary book, it's usually by happenstance. But Let the Right One In is probably my favorite, scariest book I've ever read. Very scary. Smoke and Mirrors. That's one I have. Did I talk about that in my videos? If so, thank you. Oh, Vampires Never Die. That's right. We did read that one. We need more Neil Gaiman books in this one. He needs to write more vampire books, right? Get on it, Neil. Southern Book Club was very scary. I like that. And you know, in my like list of top 5 vampire books ever read, Let the Right One In and Southern Book Club are probably up there. Yeah, they're both up there. So apparently I like scary vampire books. It just takes something for me to actually get to read them. World War Z, but with vampire, is a book from the more medical point of view of vampirism other than the strain. I feel like there is a book like World War Z, but with vampires. It's like Stories of the Vampire Apocalypse or something, or like... Yeah, there's something like that, and I'm blanking on the title, but it exists, and I've not heard anything particular about it that made me think it was anything great. Bloody Red Baron and Dracula Cha-Cha-Cha. Originally I thought the sequels to Anno Dracula would be like direct sequels, but apparently they're very, very different. They're not following the same story. They're just like own books, but in the same universe. And it sort of made me less excited to get to them because I wasn't sure what the selling point of reading them was. So if you can sell me on them, and then I might read them. I Am Legend. What about I Am Legend? So Bloody Red Baron is Dracula starring World War I, but didn't Dracula die at the end of Anno Dracula? How is he back? I mean, I guess he never dies, right? He always comes back. A romantic novel. Well, that's a selling point indeed. I don't think I Am Legend really talked about the medical side of vampires. I think it was just a more sci-fi take on vampires, but I don't think it really got into it the same way World War Z did at all. Dracula does die and get better often. It does happen often. Yeah, Southern Book Club was amazing. You want a Dracula novel that's closer to Bram Stoker's Dracula novel? Well, you should read The Powers of Darkness, because that's exactly what that is. There are 2 versions. There's the Icelandic version and the Swedish version, and neither is like better than the other. They're both just slightly different, because one was based on the other, but not quite, and then it was serialized in a newspaper, and the guy who was serializing it like put in stuff of his own that Bram Stoker didn't include. And it got translated weirdly, but yeah, read Powers of Darkness, one version or the other, and that will be like Bram Stoker's notes. Favorite Fang Sound of Music with Vampires was definitely the worst vampire book we have ever read in this book club. That's very much the truth. Dracula's the only vampire you can't keep down. Dracula and Lestat, right? They're both cockroaches. They both keep coming back. Like, Lestat is known as the one true immortal in all of existence in Anne Rice's verse, right? The true immortal that can never be killed. Oh, I'm glad you're loving Southern Book Club, Leanne. A romance novel with Galileo. Okay. You are selling me on it. Thank you. Lestat and Dracula are like cockroaches. In a good way. Because cockroaches are noble creatures. Yes. Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, that's one we're talking about, is written by Grady Hendrix, who is a white man in America, I'm pretty sure. And he writes some good books. If I were offered a cameo in one project, which would I pick? What We Do in the Vampires, or What We Do in the Shadows Season 5 or Interview with the Vampire Season 2? I would pick Interview with the Vampire Season 2, even though it is the much less good show. And What We Do in the Shadows is an amazing show. I feel like I would always regret it if I didn't pick Interview with the Vampire Season 2, even though I dislike the show. Did I ever see Rob Zombie's Monsters movie? I have not. Is it streaming? The person who played the female lead kind of ripped me off. Oh, I'm so flattered. Bye, Carson Smith. Thanks for dropping in. Am I going to review season 2? Probably. The way I reviewed season 1 of Interview with the Vampire was very labor intensive for me, that I hoped would help build my channel and would help get me more Patreon patrons supporting my channel, but it did not do that. Those videos got some good views and they were well accepted videos, but they did not get me more subscribers. They did not get me more patrons, and it was a lot of work for not much gain. Like, I didn't make more money off of them. I don't make very much money off of YouTube anyway, right? Like, my YouTube revenue is maybe like $150 a month total. That's for every view I get on YouTube, which, that's not nothing, but you can't live off that, right? So all of the actual income I make off of doing my work for vampire reviews comes from Patreon. So I was hoping by doing this really intensive breakdown of comparing the new TV show to the books, because I know people like to see how things compare to the books. Like, obviously a TV show doesn't have to be the books, so we want to look at how they're different, right? That was the premise of the show. People were mad because they thought I expected the TV show to be the books, even though I started every single video with, I don't expect the TV show to be the books. I'm just looking at how it compares to the books to talk about the differences and what those differences mean. People still got so mad about it. And I did not gain any patrons for it. I lost patrons, but I don't think it was because of that. I think it was just a natural patron loss. It did not financially benefit me at all to do it. I don't feel like I could go without reviewing season 2, but I don't think I would do it in such an aggressive fashion as I reviewed season 1, because it was a lot of work and I got really burnt out. And it was at the same time where I was really physically unwell. I was going through a lot of medical problems at the time. It was very hard with no financial, there was emotional reward, I guess, but there was no financial reward. And there was a lot of frustration and there was a lot of drama and there were a lot of people mad at me, which, is par for the course with being a YouTuber with feminist opinions on the internet. How dare I? So yeah, my reviews of season 2 might look a little bit different, but we'll see. We'll see. What We Do in the Vampires. I did say that. I have had several glasses of sparkling wine. Yeah, I know most people who stopping my patron on Patreon, it has nothing to do with me. I don't take it personally. It's for, you reasons, right? Nothing to do with me. People don't stop because they're mad at me. But I was hoping I could gain new patrons who like maybe hadn't noticed me before, who could come and replace some of those people who have to stop for their own personal reasons, or some like broaden my audience, right? Like get more people in. But it didn't do that. Like it got attention for those videos with people who maybe liked the videos or didn't like the videos, but they weren't like, I want to see what this person has to say about other vampires, so I'm going to subscribe. It didn't have that impact for me. Yeah, you know, it was an experiment. I don't like it, but I can't just throw it away. I have to finish it. This is my curse. And the chat falls silent. Chug it. Can't believe they made Anne Rice vampires gay. Like, that was not the problem with the show. Like, yes, you know, obviously Anne Rice vampires were always, sorry, I just made my hair look crazy, always gay in the books. But the TV shows made them physically intimate in a way they aren't in the books, which people were like, less shock about. Like, I like my gay vampires only being gay in subtle ways, not like real gay, because that's gross. And people were upset about that. That was not my problem with the show at all. Not at all, which you would know if you watch my videos. Vodka and apple juice, that sounds delicious. You're rereading the Witches series? It's a good series. The appeal of alcohol is that it makes me less scared to exist. I have not read a book called House of Secrets about vampire clans fighting. I've not even heard of it. Is Anne Rice overhyped? No, she's underhyped. Like, she gets so much shit. People are so awful about her. Like, she's brilliant. She's genius. She's not overhyped at all. The House of Night series. We read the first book in the House of Night series for this very book club. You can find that video on this channel. The things I do for my art. Ugh. Yeah, so in Anne Rice's books, the vampires aren't interested in physical sex. Like, becoming a vampire makes reproductive style sex lose all its appeal for these people. They are very sexual, sensual creatures that experience arousal and orgasmic feelings and orgiastic feelings, to use Anne Rice's word, through other means, through blood, through killing, mainly through killing, through death. Like, it's not just the act of drinking blood, it's the act of taking life that is orgasmic to them. And having sex with each other in a very, like, normal human sense doesn't do it for them. They're just like, this is boring, this is dumb, I'm not into it. But you can do something like that in a novel and convey that emotion in a novel that you cannot really do on TV, especially in this modern era. So I see why they changed the TV show to make them have sex in a way that an audience could see as sexy and see as, yes, there is like sexual chemistry between these characters, and that is the nature of their relationship. It is a sexual relationship, and I can understand that as a normal human audience member. As opposed to the book where it's just like, you just don't get it, man. That they did have that very same kind of attachment without the sex that they felt like the TV show wouldn't be able to convey. So it's fine. They made them have regular, ordinary people sex. That is not the problem with the TV show. That was a TV shortcut of show don't tell, of cinematic language, which is perfectly acceptable. When the novels say that Louise Creole, what do they mean ethnically? Okay, so the definition of Creole is someone born in the New Orleans area whose parents came from France. or whose ancestors came from France. Often, people born in the New Orleans area whose ancestors came from France were children of sexually abused enslaved people. So a man would come from France, rape an enslaved woman, and she would have a child, and that would be a Creole child. That was not always the case. Louis was not one of those cases. Louis was actually not technically Creole because he was actually born in France, but he did come to the New Orleans area at a very young age, so he was like basically Creole. He wasn't actually born in the Louisiana area. But he had the Creole lifestyle. He was raised as a Creole because he had parents who came from France, but he was raised in this swampland of a tropical wilderness as a child of French parents. And that is what makes him Creole. Many Creole people are mixed race because there was a lot of racial mixing in that area at that time. But the specificity of Creole is that French heritage, not any of the other heritages that may be involved. So it's not specifically the blackness or the Native Americanness or anything else that might be part of it. It is specifically the Frenchness that makes him Creole. So it was weird that the TV show decided to make Louis a black Creole without the French connection. Like, he had that French last name, but they had him be so un-French. And he was treating Lestat as like this French weirdo instead of Louis having that like intense connection to his French heritage as a Creole person. And the way the TV show treated Frenchness in New Orleans in that area was so weird because that like French was the first language of that area up until a certain point. Like in the book Interview with the Vampire, which is set many years before the TV show, they are speaking French the entire time. That is a language they speak at home. Just because they're living in America, they don't speak English. They can speak English because they're vampires. They can do anything. But French is their language that they speak with each other. The entire dialogue in that book should be in French, but we're being told the story in English, so it's translated to English for us, but it would be in French. So Louis is Creole in the sense that he is of French heritage, raised in Louisiana as a Louisiana swamp man, bayou, plantation person. Lestat also calls himself a Creole. He is not technically a Creole at all. But when you're a vampire who has French heritage, who then lives in Louisiana for 100 years, you kind of become an honorary Creole, which is, I guess, what Anne Rice was going for when she called Louis and Lestat Creole, because they absorbed that culture, and that was their culture. Lestat lived many more years in Louisiana Creole culture than he ever did in actual France as a Frenchman, even though Lestat is actually half Italian. Like, Lestat is much more Italian than he is French in, like, personality, right? Like, Lestat's an Italian boy who became an American Creole. You know, he considers himself American by this point. Have I checked out The Crimson Debt by Rose Sinister? Not yet. I saw Rose Sinister when I was in New Orleans for the Vampire Ball, which you should go to. Ask Danae. It's amazing. And she mentioned that she was going to send me an advanced review or copy of Crimson Debt, but I haven't gotten it yet. So I don't know if that's still going to happen or not, but I don't own it, so I have not read it yet. It was really weird to me how much the TV show was not French. The Interview with the Vampire TV show. Like, that first scene where Lestat meets Louis and Louis understands what he's saying in French. He's like, "You speak French? Wow!" And then, you know, Lily's like, "Oh, we speak all kinds of languages here in New Orleans." Lestat should have known that. That was the reason why Lestat was in New Orleans, because it was a French place to go and he as a Frenchman could fit in there. That was the whole reason he went there, because it was a French colony. And even if you change that to 1910 instead of 1790, it still would have been exactly the same. Like, French was permeated through the culture, even in time, like even now times you go there and half the menus are in French anyway. For him to be like, "What? French?" And for people to treat Lestat like this Euro trash, weirdy Euro Frenchy guy, like, no, that was the culture in New Orleans even at that time. Like, everyone there was French. Like, you couldn't walk down the street without seeing or hearing French. That's the way the culture was. And I think The American Hollywood people making the TV show didn't understand that about New Orleans culture. Like, even the Spanish Quarter was French at that time, right? I give Claudia a break. The actress is a child. Like, she's learning. It's her, like, biggest role yet as, like, a career builder. She had coaches who taught her. She did what she was taught. I don't blame the actress at all. I blame the people who told her to talk that way. It's like when you watch medical TV shows, right? And the doctors on the medical TV shows are saying things that real doctors watching the TV shows are like, what? No, that's not how doctoring works. It's the same thing with people watching Interview with the Vampire. What? No, that's not how French works. Now I'm all out of all drink. I did it. I feel so accomplished. I finished both of those leftover bottles from my regular book club. Have I noticed the vampire lack of shape-shifting abilities these days? You're right. That is a thing of these days. They don't shapeshift anymore. Because people don't relate to that much. I mean, I feel like werewolf culture and literature has gotten so big as its own thing that keeping vampires separate from that has felt important. That vampires, that's not going to be part of vampires right now. Like, if that's the tropes we want to explore, if that's the tropes that we want to deal with, we're going to focus on shifter literature, shifter fandom, shifter community, and vampire community is going to focus on different aspects. In original folklore, in oldie times, right, like that Bram Stoker based Dracula on when he was reading like the Book of Werewolves and everything, and he was learning about like what even is a vampire, and he was putting those ideas in his book along with a bunch of ideas he made up himself. The stuff he was reading had vampires and werewolves as the same thing. Like, basically it was the same kind of undead creature who came back from the grave and could turn into a wolf and also would drink your blood and kill its own family. Like, that was the same rolled up into a ball creature. Vampires and werewolves started off at the same idea, and then they sort of became separate monsters when we started like categorizing our monsters and making them into Disney princesses, because each one had to have their thing, right? So they're a lot more similar than you would think. And, you know, we like to joke about the werewolf versus vampire rivalry, the, like, slobs versus snobs thing, right? Like, when it comes to actual powers, it's not that big of a deal. I'm looking at my vampire makeup palettes. This is so pretty. All right, so I'm going to show you these again. So the thing about this Dracula makeup palette, and all the makeup palettes, I do have a Jane Eyre makeup palette as well by the same company. So all the colors are named after parts from the story. And because we're here, and I like hanging out with you, I'm going to read you what they are. Because what else are we going to do with our time? So this golden color is called Harker. I guess because Harker is like a golden, pure soul. This white one is called Lucy because I guess she was so innocent and white and pure. This teal peacock color is called Mina. It's sparkly, as Mina, I guess, has like a fiery, peacocky spirit. This sparkly, like periwinkle blue, yeah, that's called Helsing. Your guess is as good as mine. This non-sparkly peacock color is called Danger. This very bland gray color is called Renfield. Poor Renfield, no respect. This sparkly green color is called Treachery. This very sparkly silver color is called London. I guess it's supposed to be like London Fog, maybe? I feel like that's too glamorous for London. I would have switched Renfield and London, personally. This sparkly paler green color is called Transylvania. I guess that is the land across the forest. It's pale green, forest or green, maybe. This pure black color is called Dracula. Of course, he gets to be black. Did you see the Dracula art on this page? It's shiny. I'm sorry, the light is reflecting. He's got some, like a big scary gargoyle behind him and some bats at his feet. He's standing on his roof of some kind. This bland brown color is called demoniac, not demonic, demoniac. This smoky color is called fury. This sparkly purple color is wolf. This sparkly dark green color is castle, which is what I'm wearing in the crease of my eye. Matte purple is called fiance, because I guess that's what Mina and Jonathan are, or I guess Lucy and Holmwood are. This bright blue color is called bauble. I'm sure the word bauble is used in Dracula metaphorically to describe someone who is treated like a jewel. But I don't know why bright blue applies to them. Sparkly purple is called count, because purple is a royal color. That makes sense. Sparkly blue is called eccentric. Dracula is eccentric. Van Helsing is eccentric. This dark sparkly blue is called Seward. Oh, Jack Seward gets a sparkly color. Good for him. He's got spirit. This more matte blue color is called Thirst. I don't know why Thirst is blue. Maybe because it's the opposite of red. So when you're thirsty, you're blue, and when you're like satiated, you're red. This shimmery silver color is called Silence. Shimmery pink is Innocence. Shimmery peach is Idolatry, which I think like the gold should be idolatry, like a golden idol. Oh, camera, where'd you go away? We're talking about colors here. But this gold is called polyglot because Dracula speaks a bunch of languages, I guess. This sparkly red color is blood. This bland brown color is coffins. This gray shimmery color is salient. I would have to look up why that's a Dracula reference. What was salient about Dracula? This matte mauve color is undead. I guess that's a sort of color of like bruises. My camera. Orange Fanthy. Are you talking about my lampshade? And this shiny green color is called Toxic, because I guess poison is toxic. And this shimmery purple color is called Eternal, and that's what I'm wearing on my lid. So I got Eternal on my lid, Castle on my crease, London sort of above the crease, and then Silence as the highlight under the brow bone. That's my Dracula palette. I hope you're entertained. I mean, book club ended like, what, half an hour ago, and now we're just like shooting breeze. Because you're hanging out with me. Because I'm procrastinating writing. Yeah, zombies scare me the most. I don't think werewolves are very scary. I mean, I guess like a ravenous wolf is scary, but I don't think a ravenous wolf that's a werewolf is scarier than a regular ravenous wolf. Like, knowing a person who can become that ravenous wolf isn't scary to me. Like, I feel sorry for him, but I don't think it's scary. Vampires are scary because they are deceptive. The reason a vampire is horror is because they look just like us. They pretend to be like us. They pretend to love you. They pretend to care. They pretend to help you. And then they betray you and eat you. And it's the deception and betrayal that make vampires so scary. Werewolves don't betray you. They just like hulk out, and it's, you know, unfortunate. Zombies are scary just like as a physical being. Like, vampires are existentially scary, right? But zombies, they're just like this mindless machine that wants to eat you, and like one tiny bite, one tiny scratch of it can turn you into it, can make you lose your sense of self and make you a ravenous, mindless machine. And they just keep coming. Nothing has stopped them. You shoot them, you stop them, you stab them. They just keep coming. They don't stop. And there's always so many of them. So to me, zombies are the scariest thing, which is why I wrote a book about zombies, because they say, write what scares you. And I hate zombies, and they're so scary, so I made the main character in my book a zombie. And it worked. Write what scares you is good advice. I do use Elta MD sunscreen. The clear version. Not the unclear version, the clear version. Do I have advice for writers struggling to write? Get out. Go someplace you haven't been in a while or you've never been before, like a museum, or see a movie, or go look at some architecture, or go to a different part of the city, take a walk, get out. Experience something, put yourself in a different place than you're used to being. And something will inspire you. Something you will see, something that you will interact with will trigger something in your head. And it will help. It will help. If it doesn't help the first time, try it again. Try someplace different. Just go sit in a restaurant by yourself and eat alone. Go see a movie alone. Go wander around an art exhibit. Whatever like speaks to you. You know, if you're into sports, go watch a game. Sports. Get out. That is my advice if you're stuck on writing. I know getting out sucks. Who likes going outside? Oh, well, I'm glad you're back, Vampire Bear 13. Thank you for returning. Sorry you're here on a day where I'm kind of sick. I mean, kind of weird is because my, like, voice is all froggy. I have a head cold, and I've had 2 glasses of champagne. You're welcome. Oh, wow, it's almost 11 o'clock. I'm glad we've spent so much time together. If you have any last questions, thoughts, feelings, things you want to share with me, now's your chance. Thank you for hanging out with me. I love talking to you guys. You are so fun. I like that you like the things that I like. I like that we share interests. That's not something that I have with people in my real life, which is why I have you in my Discord server, in my Vampire Book Club, to talk about these things with, because, you know, the internet is for that, right? Finding people with similar interests. If you're not part of my Discord server, you can join. Link is in the description. It has about 1,000 people in it, but it's actually like kind of a quiet and slow and chill Discord server. Definitely not 1,000 people talking at once. If like 40 of us ever talk, I'd be surprised. Come talk to me. Talk about vampires. It is a themed Discord server. It is not there just for anything. Don't come there and talk about your lunch. Talk about like things that you happened to you today that you think other vampire fans would enjoy. Talk about movies you like, or music you like, or anything that's related to like spooky gothiness, Addams Family, Beetlejuice, anything like tangentially related to gothiness is cool to talk about in my Discord server. You can also join the book club. You don't have to actually participate in the book club. You don't have to read the book. You don't have to like listen about the book, but you can join the book club. You have to click the book icon in the bot channel to join the book club. It is private, but anyone can join. And then you can see what we're all saying about the book and make your suggestions for books you want to read next. If the book you want to read next is not a book I own, you can make me own it by sending it to my P.O. box. The link is in the description. A lot of people send me like old books they're getting rid of, or books they found at used bookstores or library sales, just so I have a copy to put on my vampire bookshelf. But the point of this book club is to read the books that I already own. Not for me to go out and buy more books, because I do not need to do that. I do get a lot of books as gifts, which is where most of my books come from. Got a bunch for Christmas. And my birthday is coming up in 6 weeks. How has it been almost half a year since Christmas already? My birthday's in May. Christmas was in December. Yeah. Whatever. Books. If there's something you want me to review on Vampire Reviews, you can suggest it there. There's a Vampire Reviews channel. If you want to help support book club or the Discord server or my channel or anything that has to do with anything that we do together, join my Patreon. If you join for $2 a month, or no, wait, $2 a video, you get to see all my videos ahead of time, early before everyone else does. And if you can't join my Patreon, you can just like leave comments on my videos, like my videos, subscribe, I don't know, whatever helps the algorithm, all that stuff. A lot of you are talking in the chat here on this channel, but if you actually leave a comment on this video, like underneath the video, it helps things. So like if there's something you wanted to say to me or want me to answer later, if you ask me a question in my YouTube comments, I pretty much always answer. The only time I don't answer is if like I don't have a good answer and I'm like, I don't know what to say to that. But like if you ask me a question I know the answer of, I'm going to answer in the comments. And like if we have a conversation in the YouTube comments, it's good for the channel. And that helps everyone win. You can follow me on Twitter. That's in my YouTube channels. Like all the links are there. I'm on Facebook, everything. But talk to me on Discord. Like Discord is where we actually hang out, where we can actually like be friends, right? So thank you for joining Vampire Book Club. Thank you for listening to talk about Eyeshadow by VampireCosmetics.com. I don't know. I talk about them like they're paying me to advertise, but they're not. I just like them. If you want to read with us next time, we are reading Reluctant Immortals by Gwendolyn Kist, a modernized, but not like all the way modernized, sequel to Dracula and Jane Eyre, starring Lucy Westenra and Bertha Mason and Edward Rochester and Dracula. Set in 1967 on the west coast of America. You have until April 13th to read it. Our book club live streams are usually on the 13th or shortly thereafter, depending on, schedules and stuff. And if you want to read something in particular next time, bring your suggestions. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to take one last look at the chat, see if there's anything else relevant we want to talk about. Like my live stream. I love you guys. You're so great. Thank you for coming. I always enjoy book club with you. Next time, bring a drink and drink with me. Today's gone by. Good night. Blah. All those vampire things. Love you.